SpaceX just announced it's going public at a valuation that'll make your head spin. We're talking about a company being valued at more than $200 billion. That's more than Tesla on listing day. But here's what nobody's talking about yet. This morning's IPO filing dropped right alongside two other stories that completely reshape how the tech industry works. The US and Iran just announced a surprise deal that'll change where microchips come from. And Jeff Bezos just gave a speech about AI that's making every tech CEO nervous. Three stories, one morning, all connected. Most news outlets are treating them separately. SpaceX here, Geopolitics there, Bezos over there. But the real story is how they all lock together. This morning's announcement isn't just about a space company listing. It's about power. It's about who controls the future. It's about the supply chains that make artificial intelligence possible. And it's about what happens when you concentrate that much technology in the hands of just a few companies. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this morning matters more than most people realize. And you'll see the thread connecting all three stories in a way the mainstream coverage completely missed. Let's step back for a second. The tech industry moves fast, but the fundamental forces moving it are actually pretty simple. Money flows to innovation. Innovation creates competitive advantage, and competitive advantage is what keeps companies in power. Right now, we're in the middle of the biggest technological transition since the internet itself. Artificial intelligence is the game, and whoever controls the best AI systems will control trillions of dollars in value. It's not hyperbole, that's what the entire market is pricing in. But here's the problem. Building world-class AI requires three things. 1, brilliant engineering. 2, absolutely massive computing power. And 3, access to the rare materials and chips that power that computing. For the last few years, most of those rare materials came through supply chains controlled by US allies. But supply chains are fragile. One geopolitical hiccup, and suddenly chip prices double. Suddenly competitors can't access the hardware they need. Suddenly the power balance changes. That's exactly what makes this morning so interesting, because each of these three stories is about control. Control of space, control of supply chains, control of who gets to build the best AI. And when three control stories hit on the same morning, the market pays attention. SpaceX filing for an IPO at $200 billion might sound like a random number, but it's actually incredibly intentional. Here's why. SpaceX isn't a traditional aerospace company. Traditional aerospace makes airplanes and missiles and satellites, hardware basically. SpaceX does that, sure, but SpaceX also owns the launch infrastructure. Think about that for a second. They own the rockets. They own the landing pads. They own the ground stations. They own the ability to get anything into space. That's not a hardware business. That's a utility business. It's more like owning the power grid than owning a car manufacturer. The valuation reflects that. $200 billion says the market believes that launching things into space is about to become routine. Routine enough that Starlink alone, their satellite internet division, could be worth $50 billion. Routine enough that eventually space becomes just another layer of infrastructure. Now, here's where it connects to AI. The second half of the space race isn't about astronauts or moon bases. It's about satellites. Specifically, satellites that can relay data, coordinate infrastructure, and enable global communications. Those satellites need advanced computing systems. They need the same kind of chips that power AI, which means SpaceX competing for chip supply, which means SpaceX now has a seat at the table in the geopolitical chip wars. And that's where this morning's second story comes in. The US and Iran trade agreement that dropped this morning doesn't sound like tech news. It sounds like politics. But it's fundamentally about one thing: semiconductor access. Here's the situation. Right now, the vast majority of advanced chips come from either the United States, Taiwan, or South Korea, all US allies. That gives America enormous leverage. It also means Iran has been completely locked out of advanced chip technology for decades. That created a problem. Iran couldn't build modern weapons systems, couldn't develop advanced infrastructure, couldn't build anything that requires modern computing. That's actually why this deal matters. The US just agreed to ease some restrictions on Iranian tech imports. Nothing dramatic, but it's enough to signal that the absolute embargo is loosening. Why? Because keeping an entire nation locked out of basic computing technology is unstable. It creates desperation. Desperation leads to black markets. Black markets lead to smuggling. Smuggling leads to those restricted chips ending up in the wrong hands. But here's the real consequence for the tech industry. If the US is willing to loosen restrictions on Iran, what about India? What about Brazil? What about all the countries that are buying chips but aren't traditional US allies? The chip supply map just got more complicated. And complicated supply chains mean higher prices. Higher prices mean only the richest companies can afford the best hardware, which means only the richest companies can afford to train the biggest AI models. Jeff Bezos gave a speech this morning where he basically said, the future is consolidating, and not in a good way. He didn't name names, but he didn't need to. He was clearly talking about companies like OpenAI, Google, and Meta. The observation was simple: artificial intelligence is expensive. It's absurdly expensive. Training a state-of-the-art language model costs hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more than $1 billion for the biggest ones. That kind of money is only available to a handful of companies. Google has it, Meta has it, OpenAI has it through massive Saudi funding, Microsoft has it because they are Microsoft, Bezos has it, everyone else, they are priced out. What Bezos was warning about is that this creates a natural monopoly. The richest companies can afford the best chips. The best chips let them train the best models. The best models generate more revenue. More revenue means more money for the next generation of chips. The smaller players can't compete. The medium players get crushed, and you end up with 3 or 4 companies controlling all of artificial intelligence. That's actually way more dangerous than people realize. Because when AI is concentrated like that, you get a few executives making decisions that affect billions of people. You lose competition. You lose innovation from unexpected places. You lose diversity of thought. That's the real warning in Bezos's speech. And it's why the SpaceX IPO and the Iran trade deal actually matter to his point. Because supply chain control is how you break that consolidation. If more companies have access to chip supply, maybe they can afford to build competing AI systems. Maybe the game isn't already over. Now here's where all 3 stories connect in a way that most people will completely miss. The market doesn't care about SpaceX as a space company. The market doesn't care about Iran as a geopolitical story. The market cares about one thing: who controls the future of artificial intelligence. SpaceX going public at $200 billion is saying, we believe satellite-based communications and infrastructure is going to be worth massive money. Probably because AI systems need global infrastructure to operate. The Iran deal is saying, we are loosening chip supply restrictions, which means more players might get access to computing power. Maybe it's not about Iran specifically, maybe it's about signaling to other countries that the embargo era is ending. Bezos's warning is saying, the consolidation is real and we should be worried. Put those 3 together and you get a picture of a market in transition. The winners aren't just companies. The winners are whoever controls the physical infrastructure, the actual silicon, the actual rockets, the actual supply chains. That's why this morning mattered. That's why these 3 stories hit on the same day. They're all about the same fundamental question: who gets to build the future? And that question is worth $200 billion. It's worth trade negotiations. It's worth warnings from billionaires. Because getting the answer wrong doesn't just cost companies money. It shapes what the world looks like in a decade. If you want to understand how this plays out, here's what to watch for. First, SpaceX. The IPO filing is going to take months. What matters is the valuation. If institutional investors are willing to back a $200 billion private valuation, that's a signal that space infrastructure is here to stay. Watch the IPO price when it happens. If it opens at $200 billion or higher, the market believes Bezos's consolidation warning. If it opens lower, it means investors think space is less important to the future. Second, Iran and chip supply. Watch which companies benefit first. Companies that benefit from cheaper chip access are the ones that were previously locked out. If you see a bunch of smaller AI startups suddenly announcing new model training runs, that's your signal that supply chains are loosening. Third, watch what the mega-cap tech companies do. Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon. If they suddenly announce massive new chip purchases, that's them racing to lock in supply before prices rise. If they announce massive data centers, that's them preparing for a world where they still expect to dominate AI. The real tell, though, is what Bezos does next. His warning this morning wasn't random. He's signaling that he thinks the game is rigged. If Amazon starts investing in new AI infrastructure in the next 6 months, that's him betting he can still compete. If he doesn't, that's him admitting the consolidation is complete. Watch those 3 signals. They'll tell you everything about where the tech industry is actually headed. SpaceX filing for an IPO, the US and Iran reaching a trade deal, Bezos warning about AI consolidation, 3 stories, 1 morning, and what it all adds up to is this: the age of infinite AI growth is ending. For years, we thought artificial intelligence would just keep getting better and better forever. More computers, more chips, more data. Done, but that's not how the world works. Supply is finite, power is concentrated, and consolidation is real. The companies that will win the next decade are the ones that can secure access to the things that actually matter. Silicon, satellites, supply chains. That's the story nobody's talking about yet. That's what this morning actually meant. For you watching this right now, here's what matters. If you're thinking about investing in tech, pay attention to supply chain plays, companies that own infrastructure, companies with access to rare materials, companies that can produce their own chips. The AI arms race isn't about code anymore. It's about silicon. It's about rockets. It's about who can actually build the hardware. And this morning, the market just told us it's willing to pay $200 billion for that infrastructure. That's your signal. That's your story. Follow us for daily briefings on stories like this, the ones that actually move markets, even when nobody's paying attention. Subscribe, and you'll know what's coming before everyone else does.